All right. I think it's a good time to get started, even though I can see more and more people are coming in. Welcome, everybody. This is the August version of a Deep Adaptation Forum Zoom call. As I was just mentioning, started out being intended for the coaching and counseling subgroup of the forum. And really, after the first invitation was sent out, it looks like we may well be merging with the holistic approaches subgroup of the Deep Adaptation Forum. So if you're here from either of those, or actually any aspect of the Deep Adaptation Forum, my warmest welcome to you all. I'm one of three folks that have been being volunteer moderators of one kind or another in the coaching and counseling group. There's Matthew Paynton, and there's Elzan Rus, who's also, I think you're still here, just not seeing you. And this call is scheduled to be an hour and a half long from whatever your starting time is. And we have a number of things that would be good to talk about today. One of them might be this merging that I just mentioned. There are other things on a possible agenda, and there's openness for other things that you all might bring individually. But before we get going in any of that, I'd like to introduce Katie Carr, who is one of the founding members of this forum, and really the senior voice, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of how to form this thing, this extraordinary Deep Adaptation Forum, a remarkable and hopefully ever-growing network of people addressing what is easily the most important conversation humanity's ever had. So the pressure is on all of us to some degree or another to come up with new ways of being and new ways of engaging with each other in this most important conversation. And so Katie, by the way, if you've got speaker view up, you can see everybody on the call. And how you do that, if you haven't done it already, is up in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You can click on either gallery view or speaker view. And if you hit gallery view, you'll see everybody. Or if you hit speaker view, you'll see the person that's talking. And the person that will be talking in just a moment is Katie Carr. And Katie is bringing a set of what she's been calling principles gathered from a number of different methodologies. I can vouch for being very powerful and inviting for a full and heartful participation in just about any meeting that I've seen them in. So, Katie, I appreciate that you've taken time from another engagement that you've been in. It is a joy to have you here. So for the next half hour or so, would you tell us about perhaps a bit about yourself, but then about these principles and why we might want to have them as a part of this kind of call?
Sure, thank you, Dean. A little bit about myself. At the moment, I'm sitting in the back of my car. I smell of wood smoke and I've got muddy feet because I'm in the first couple of days of a week-long kind of wild camp with lots of spiritual song and dance. So it seems the mind that I have brought to this seems almost at odds with needing to speak to a lot of people on Zoom. So I'm going to do my best to be as coherent as I possibly can. So yeah, I work with Jem and four other people as part of the core team supporting the development of the forum and much wider raft of activities. And I'm a I'm a facilitator, space holder. I worked for quite a lot of years in an NGO that did sustainability education, and stopped doing that a while ago when I realised that the amount of effort it was taking for me to collude in, you know, even the very well-meaning efforts behind it, particularly in a system which we had no hope of really changing the system. So I stopped that, and I've been working with GEM since then. And part of my past experience, which has informed the development of these principles and our practices in facilitation, are experiencing critical pedagogy, so ways of being together which can enable people to step back and step out temporarily and try out a vantage point of being able to see some of the more insidious, invisible parts of how we relate with each other, and how those have contributed to the predicament that we're in. So that's really, really important in the principles, although we don't talk about critical pedagogy explicitly in those principles. That's there. So the aim of them is to try to create something which can serve as a sort of foundational navigation aid rather than a map. So knowing that there are so many people now who, a lot of people who may have never stepped up into the role of creating community, who are feeling called to, even if it's just because they need community themselves in order to process and support on this journey of awareness, but also people who are focusing on the practical community adaptation measures, which they may want to take. So we definitely don't want to say this is how you do it. This is not, deep adaptation gatherings is not a trademarked thing, or it's really, really about a co-created set of ways of being together, which reflect the principles of deep adaptation. And I don't know if everybody's aware, but the 4 R's of deep adaptation were originally 3, and Jem published his work on the 4th, on reconciliation, a few months after he was beginning to be in more and more conversations with more and more different people from different backgrounds after having read his paper. And it was noticing that one of the ways in which we can react is from this scarcity mentality, from this action needs to be taken, we need to do something about it at any cost. And so he was really, really keen to try and make explicit as possible the need for love and connection and respect to be at the heart of certainly the way that we talk about collapse and the way that we talk about deep adaptation. So that's where the 4th R came from. And so it's that principle of togetherness, and that principle of let's take this as an opportunity to move into our best selves rather than into our worst selves. And that's kind of underpinned the development of these principles. And I haven't done them by myself. We've been working with groups online and in person. And Zori, who was going to be coming on this call but couldn't make it, her and I have been working together on them. So what I'd like to do here, because they're really, really, as well as making them available as a resource for facilitators through the Facebook group to support, there's people who are setting up groups that are themed or that are locally based, and also making them available as a resource through the Deep Adaptation Forum. We also want to connect them with the guidance website that Stina and Matthew and Brennan are working with. So it's just about, I'm bringing them now because I know that the members of these two groups in particular, it's particularly relevant to the members of these two groups who will have vast expertise in being with people, in supporting people. So I want to share them as a draft and invite comments or observations before we share them more publicly in probably about a week's time or just over. So I think, Dean, you were going to share your screen while I mention a few elements of this. Wow, modern technology. I've got muddy feet and I'm sitting staring at my phone in the back of my car and we can do this. Amazing. So I'm going to ask you if you can scroll down. The first bit of it is probably not that relevant, but to page 2, the DA values. Yeah, down a little bit more. There. Yeah, so we start by introducing these 3 values, which is saying return to compassion, return to curiosity, which is very much about this idea that there aren't necessarily any answers, and probably any answers that might jump to mind immediately are not the helpful ones. So really coming back to curiosity about, it says there, so valuing curiosity invites us to challenge some of the ingrained or invisible assumptions that underpin our worldview. And then the final one, respect. So there are 6 key principles. If you can scroll down again a little bit, please. And a little bit more, yeah. So principle 1. So for the sake of narrative, they've been presented as the first 2 principles relating to curiosity and the next 2 relating to compassion, I think, yeah. But I feel like it's more like a kaleidoscope. You know, your entry point to, for example, co-creation also connects with it connects with curiosity, with compassion, and with respect. But just to kind of give this some shape, this is how they're organized. So the first principle is co-creation, and this connects with not just the idea of community being collaborative, and also that any solutions to the predicament, or practical actions, are going to be about co-creation. But they're also about this realizing that knowledge is provisional and knowledge is collaborative, and ways of knowing are context specific. So any approaches to supporting groups should foreground this idea of co-creation. And the second principle about open dialogue, for many people here, I'm guessing that that's going to be a foregone conclusion. We can assume that open dialogue is important, but for that reason, it feels like it's important to put that front and center. So the second principle is about awareness, and we kind of, under awareness, this it's about awareness of self, awareness of the people that you're with and the connection, but it's also, we made a decision to downplay in this section. I'm being buzzed by a wasp. To downplay one of the earlier drafts had quite overt language about spirituality, and we didn't want to. I recognise that excludes. Often it can be less helpful, so we've tried to describe things like enabling and embodying loving responses. Talk about the phenomena of awareness, and the same in connection as well. Talking about the phenomena of experiencing connection rather than couching it in any overtly spiritual terms. Although I recognise for a lot of people the spiritual element of this experience, this journey, is really important. And then the third core value is respect, and the principles under here are inclusivity is the first one, and ownership. Inclusivity is the one which so far has generated the most. If you can scroll down a little bit, please, Dean. Inclusivity has been the one which has generated the most dialogue, debate, inquiry. For one thing, certainly in UK context, inclusivity has become a buzzword in schools and in social services, to the point where it seems to have lost all meaning. So we have, we've done our best to be quite concise about the description of this. But there's also questions that come up about, if everything's welcome, everybody's included, how does that create a space for calling out or addressing behaviours or ways of speaking which are excluding? And there's been a lot of debate around that. I've got my own perspective on it, but I just wanted to note that. And then ownership is really this connecting with the idea of it's not helpful to be having conversations or engaging in ways which are about othering or naming and blaming, or holding resentment towards, I don't know, CEOs of fossil fuel companies, etc. That actually all of the emotions arise, but taking ownership and recognizing that, if I'm triggered in a particular way by this particular kind of language, what's that telling me about me, and how do I grow through that? So it's a set of principles which they don't, later on in the document, I think there are some suggested formats, and what we're hoping to do, these ones are just really basically including ones that we've got quite a lot of experience with, and so we know that they have proved really useful ways in bringing those principles alive in group spaces. But what we are hoping to do is that when this document becomes more live, and I'm going to be hosting a series of Zooms for people on the Facebook group who want to build their capacity and confidence for hosting spaces, that we will be able to start sharing practices and build into a kind of a collective bank of resources. So I think I have talked enough. Let me check if there's anything else I needed to say. Oh, just one other thing, another area of debate or inquiry that's come about is particularly, I'm looking at the last suggested practices, formats. There's themed discussions, and then there's meeting with an agenda, and there's this need to balance the two. I'm really of the perspective that the inner work of deep adaptation is where I want to put my attention, because the outer work then arises from a place of, or has more chance to arise from a place of equanimity, of love and compassion and connection. Whereas we've been talking about this, the fact that so many people come into this space with I need to know what to do, and I need to start doing it now. So it's trying to recognize that energy will be there. It's you know, seems like a ubiquitous human trait right now. So it's trying to try and find ways that can hold that energy as well, and that intention as well. Yeah, so that was the last thing that I wanted to share. So I know that I've given quite a I've rattled through those, and if you haven't already, we can share. If you haven't already seen it, we can share a link. So after today's discussion, if you want to have a look, and if you have any other feedback or observations or ideas, then you're free to send those to me. Maybe the best way would be through the as a message through the platform. But for now, I just wanted to open up for discussion, any questions or any observations or comments that anybody has about the usefulness or otherwise. And Dean, can I hand over to you to kind of make that happen, because I can't see all of the pictures on the screen.
Of course, sure. So if you know that you've got a question right now for Katie and you have the ability to unmute yourself, feel free, go for that. And if there's anyone who has trouble unmuting yourself, or you do have a question, but you don't know how to do this thing, there's a way to raise your hand in your, if you have been able to find the chat option at the bottom of your screen, you can click on that and see the chat functionality, and then also manage participants. There's another window to open, and that gives you a number of different choices for your participation as well. You can, again, raise your hand. You can have responses that we're not going to go into right now. So is there anyone who has a question for Katie now?
Hi, my name's Tori Reed. Nice to see all of these like-minded faces. I had trouble getting on the call because I couldn't find the login information, and so I missed the setup. So I just want to ask, what is the function and use of the document that we just took a look at, and the concepts therein? Thank you.
Thanks, Tori. And before I answer your question, I noticed a chat popped up from Betty, asked about the Facebook group that I was referring to. It's the general Positive Deep Adaptation Facebook group, rather than one of the the other regional ones. So the intention of these principles are just as an offer, really. What I mentioned before was that it's as a response to so many people saying we need community, we need spaces where we can connect. And there's lots of people who recognize they haven't got their own community, so they're going out and creating it, whether that's in person in their neighborhood or whether it's online. So it's an offer, really, and we want to put them out in a couple of weeks. But also recognizing that that's probably not going to be the final version, that, you know, these things get polished to and added to over time.
Is there anyone else? Elizabeth, please.
Yeah, hi, Katie. I guess what I'm wondering, for my own purposes, I'm interested in starting really like hyper-local, as in on my street, and my plan is to learn enough to then reach out and see if there's interest to start even with a few people. Is this applicable for like very small local groups, or is this more like a large group kind of approach?
We hope for all sizes. So as you were saying that, I was thinking about, that's when I think about my life, you've just touched on the bit that I think is the most challenging, but also the most important. And yes, and I'm wondering as well whether there might be some of the actual practices which I'm thinking I would love to be able to invite my neighbours into what we call authentic relating or circling, just, you know, starting to practice saying exactly what is in you. So the intention is that it's a kind of loosely held way of navigating, rather than this must be for groups over 30 or something like that. Yeah, we hope it can be applicable. And that's reminded me of another point, which is the principles are not intended to be an artifact or a resource for people in your group to look at. They're intended for you or anybody. They're intended for the facilitator. But we were talking about trying to make a snappier kind of resource about them that could be used and shared in groups as a kind of discussion point or something.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have like just an agreed upon jumping off point. And the other thing that might be useful, if there are others in the deep adaptation world, to like have maybe some case studies or some kind of board just around neighborhoods, for instance, or starting very locally, and so we could learn from each other.
Yeah.
What worked, what didn't work.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful actually, and I will incorporate that into the facilitators group with the Facebook group, is asking people to feed back, to share their experiences.
And one last question, I'm not on Facebook. Is there a comparable space that is how different is it, and is there another way to access that community?
Yeah. Well, firstly, well done, you enlightened being.
Right.
I don't know. I don't use Facebook a lot. This is the thing that I use it for most, and it's. I mean, it really is, compared to most Facebook groups I've ever had any kind of experience of. It's a beautifully held space, very respectful. Hardly ever do you get, kicking off or arguments or getting personal. And I don't know of a comparable one. I mean, it serves a really different function from the forum. It tends to be people find themselves in that group having just gone, so there's an awful lot of emotional support and sharing grieving, but it isn't the same as the forum, in that the forum is really professionally based and action oriented. So I don't know of an equivalent.
Thank you.
Hi, Katie. Hi, Dean.
Can I have a second? Just Dean, I can stay longer. I've got the start time of the meeting wrong, so I have got longer, but I want to leave it to you because I don't want to use up too much of your meeting time. So Joseph.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think we should, let's just randomly choose 10 minutes as an extension time and see how we're doing at the end of those 10 minutes. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Great.
Yeah.
I have a
I'm Joseph
question.
from Freiburg, Germany, and I'm already planning in my ongoing inquiry group with quite experienced people in inquiry, in presence, and so on, to open the space for this, deeper adaptation. And I'd like, on the one side, I'd like to share the experience with our community here, but I also feel like I need support because it's quite new to offer this kind of work for these people who are mostly spiritual seekers. So this is where I am. And I guess we will find ways to share. I'm not sure yet how to. Do you know something about that, Dean?
I don't want to take too much time about the form here, unless Katie, that really works for you to use this time that you've got remaining. One thing I can say is that in my experience, we've used a very small percentage of what's possible on the forum page, if you will, for us to connect there. And there's a whole aspect of that that's just formulating called task groups. And that can sound a little dry, but it's a place where those of us who have similar interests can come together, coalesce, share resources. So I think in the general page now, that's now expanding out to include 2 huge groups together. I'm actually amazed how little traffic there is, how little sharing of our own personal sharing, our own articles, or not to mention other articles from other people. And I think that there's a tremendous possibility in this task group option on the forum for those who don't care for Facebook, of which I am one. So I'll just leave it at that for the moment and put it back to you, Katie. Do you have a focus that you'd like to keep us on here in these last few minutes?
No. I don't really have a focus or an agenda. Everything that is being said is really, really helpful. So
Great.
yeah, whatever.
I have a question. My name is Amy and I'm in California. And can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so you said something, Katie, about anger, and it's interesting to me. This may come off as a bit more raw than I would normally present, but I've just finished a Medium piece on being a bit angry at the government and the media for not taking on the task of really protecting us, and informing us of what's essential. And I come from a spiritual background. There's another woman, Kimberly, who comes from the same spiritual, psychological background and teaching, where we do take tremendous responsibility for our anger. It's all coming from us. It's all coming from our interpretation and our thoughts, and also a sense of separation. And yet there's this other piece of here I am running around trying to organize my community, when I have children to tend to, and it's like, why? Sometimes I'm like, why am I having to do this? Why am I having to get the media to pay attention? And I'm not saying that's a stuck place, but I'm just wondering, you said something about anger with the fossil fuel industry, and I wasn't clear about what you were saying about that emotion. And I'm wondering if there's been a discussion about it. I know it's not helpful to stay there. I also know that Martin Luther King could be angry sometimes. And that's just an interesting emotion. And I wonder if there's something more, we could have more of a discussion on the forum or on the conversation about the document. But I'm feeling a bit angry right now. And this is just not right. We know ExxonMobil has funded denial science, and that's been a genocidal. And maybe that's not going to get us anywhere. I don't know. So that's just my thought right now, as someone who has come from a spiritual background, and I'm trying to also acknowledge, that sometimes anger can be a righteous anger and helpful. So I'm wondering what the thinking is there and what you said and so forth.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So the principles themselves, I don't think make any explicit reference. They do talk about our triggers and owning your experience of those. And my personal, I did talk at the beginning, Amy, about some of the insidious and invisible rules or norms that collectively we seem to have agreed upon. And one of those is that anger is unpalatable, particularly for women. There's lots and lots of research that says that women are far less able to connect with what might be the good kind of anger, let alone articulate it. And so, I would never, all of my practice is about providing spaces for people to show up with all of the bits of themselves, particularly the bits of themselves that they might have been taught by life are not nice, that they're dark, that they're shameful. And I think it's an important thing for us to be able to start to become unafraid of, you know. And let me just try and find the relevant part. Yeah, so the principle 6 where this mentions this is about everyone's invited to step into a space with a clear intention that each of us seeks to recognize our experiences as our own rather than blaming others. And that's how the difference for me is, yes, there is righteous anger. It's perfectly legitimate that many, if not all of us, should be feeling anger. But in order for that to be a place from which energy, action, aliveness comes, then yeah, as you said, it needs to be something that can move through being expressed and witnessed rather than it being something which stays inside. Does that speak to where you're at?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really fertile ground for discussion, especially for those of us who've been in spiritual communities. It's been a challenge to introduce the crisis to our communities, actually, because it's so negative, you know? And so I've been really in the adventure of that right now, along with Kimberly, who's on the webinar with me. So thank you. It's what I'm in the midst of.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Christopher from Boulder, Colorado. I'm wondering what do you think how effective a facilitator can be if they haven't gone through one of these programs like Mastermind or 6 Stages of Grief with Joanna Macy, I found that really freeing, like to get past my huge anger piece about everything was, doing some of Joanna Macy's work really helped free me to move past that and grieve. And then that doesn't mean I didn't get angry again. you know, I mean, you can keep doing the grieving 6 steps of grief, more than once. But so how effective do you think a facilitator can be if they have, until they do some intense inner work?
Thanks. I think our intention for these principles is not to say read these and then you can facilitate really deep ongoing processes with groups of people. It's not replacing, experience and support in that way. It's more kind of, I guess the intention is for those people who do already have a broad range of their own practices and lots of experience. It's kind of like offering a container or a framework to say all of your experiences can connect with or bring deep adaptation principles if you think about how they connect with these 6 things. And on the other end of the spectrum is, as I said at the beginning, is this might be a framework for, very, very beginning, because I know there are lots of people, and I've had it as well recently, thinking there is no women's group where I live, and I really want a women's group, and I don't feel super confident about it, but I know I don't have to be perfect, but these sets of principles might be useful just to again, it's like offering a container. So it's not offered as an alternative to the kinds of things that you've talked about, but it might help us to identify, a number of people who who would like to set up a closer, more ongoing community of practice around facilitating deep adaptation processes. And yes, Joanna Macy's work is amazing, and I've offered, you know, some of it in some of our face-to-face work as well.
Katie, it seems to me that we've made a very natural segue from actually the principles that we might use in-house in our own calls as you've been introducing them, really to a broader conversation. And that's exactly the point of the call itself. I would like to invite you to stay for as long as you'd like, and I'd also like you to please say more of anything that you feel like it hasn't been said to your satisfaction, and join us perhaps in this segue. So first, I would like to thank you for laying out these principles and the beautiful work that's been done to get them to this point, and I'm sure a bit more in polishing as before they're fully public. Is there anything that you'd like to say to just complete that portion? And would you like to join us as we segue into the broader conversation?
Nothing to add, just a big thanks and a reminder that if anything does spring to mind in the next few days, to drop me a message through the forum. And I can stay for another 10 minutes. And I want to say hi, Malika. I saw you pop up.
Yeah.
And that's all. Thanks so much for having me, Dean, and thank you to everybody else for your input.
Absolute pleasure, Katie. Thank you. All right. I literally have just spoken. What's real for me is that what a gorgeous segue that these past couple of comments and questions have really taken us from that particular focus that Katie had on introducing the principles to the broader conversation that really we are all in. And again, I'll just say it really unapologetically. I believe that what we're all here for is the most important conversation in human history. And I would also like to underscore that from my perspective, nobody knows how to do this one. Nobody knows how to do this one. So, excuse me, but there's something that's very potent when I just let myself pause for a moment and to realize, you know, this is the kind of work that I'm in all day, every day, one way or another. And I run the risk of normalizing it. And how on earth can one normalize what we're talking about? But I can do it. So I just took a moment to pause and to let my experience come back into my body more fully than it was. And in just saying these words to you, I'm moved. I'm very moved by what Katie is obviously up to with GEM in the creation of the forum and so many other things that they're working on. And I'm very, very moved by the groups, these two groups of people. There's roughly 500 people now in what will be one large clump of us, instead of being coaching and counseling subgroup and the holistic approaches subgroup of the Deep Adaptation Forum. It looks like we're going to be merging those two. And I'm just deeply moved by the number of people. And as I look at each face on my screen, I've got, again, on my screen, I've chosen the view that shows me all the faces. And it is so, so moving to have your presence here with me. I am always hungry for this experience of being with kindred spirits in this tough conversation. I'd like to invite us to get to know each other a little bit, whether you Yeah, in a moment, I'd like to start us on what will be a couple of different opportunities to get in small groups on this call and to introduce ourselves to a couple of other people, get to know each other a little bit, get to presence ourselves a little bit, and hopefully if we have 2, maybe 3 possible small group conversations before the end of the call, we'll see. Before I start to speak about that, is there anyone that's really sitting on something that's a bit urgent, or there's a lingering question that you just wanted to ask and wanted to ask it before it drifts away? I'd like to shift gears, but I don't want to leave something that's important behind. Yeah, Elizabeth, please.
Yeah, I had a follow-on question. I don't know if now is the time to address this or if it's discussed elsewhere, but I'm wondering about like these kinds of discussions. Again, I'm looking at my neighborhood and you find yourself in a situation where you've organized this kind of conversation and people are coming to it for the first time. And they don't have practices, they don't even know what kind of inner resourcefulness, they don't have a spiritual practice or anything like that, this is very new to them, so they're needing extra support. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on, is there a gradual way to enter this conversation? Are there thoughts on kind of levels of depth you can go to maybe over time rather than diving right in?
Yeah. It's a deep and broad question, Elizabeth, and an excellent question. And I think to give it any kind of really diligence in any kind of response and depth in any kind of response, what I would suggest is that this sounds like it wants to become a task group. Again, kind of an awkward name, but it's really an opportunity to bring a number of people with similar interests together to follow a thread, which is now called tasks, but it's really a study group, if you will, or a focus group, where you can bring this quality of question to each other. And you could call it a mastermind group as well. There are a number of ways to couch it. And I would suggest that using the chat and also posting on the group, on the page of the group, and saying, I have these interests and these questions. I'd like to propose a particular thread, and here it is. There's Elzan put up a link, I believe, to a page of information about how to start one of these task groups. I'm not finding it in the chat right this moment.
Just posted it again.
Posting it again?
Yeah.
Great.
It's basically on the forum on the top right. It's one of the main items on the menu is the task groups, and there's a long explanation of exactly how to go about it.
Okay. Is that okay for now, Elizabeth?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Okay.
There was also I've forgotten the name of the person that was sharing just a while ago as well. I would just like to say that they were talking about, is it possible for someone who's wanting to do facilitation to someone who's wanting to offer services in their community in this kind of work, in deep adaptation-oriented work? And I believe the question was something like, how can they offer it without having experienced really depth in this conversation, in having really brought to their own experience to bear in this conversation? And my brief answer would be, it's not wise to. I would actually say worse things. I would say more pointed and judgmental things, but I'm going to just withhold myself on that because my judgments don't mean anything here. They're not valuable. But I would suggest that it is absolutely essential to be doing one's own inner work, to have an authentic and as deep as you can allow, engagement with these principles and with the aspects and with this loose affiliation of different topics and services that we're all representing one way or another here in this large, 500 plus person group. If we're not engaged in our own practices, and then we are bold enough to say, here I am offering services that address these core needs in the community around deep adaptation issues, I think there's possibly the word I would come up with is danger there, of someone just ill-equipped, just without the experiential base to be able to then offer it in good faith to others. So why I'm mentioning that is that this has been a big part of what Matthew and Elzan and I have been kind of corralling as a main theme of conversation in our earlier calls since the beginning of the Deep Adaptation Forum in the coaching and counseling group, and something I'm very, very excited to see expanded and shared with the holistic approaches group. As we grow into one group, really the issues are the same. There's a level of integrity that we must have, especially if we're going to offer services to others, that I just don't think, there's an expression from the business as usual paradigm, from the coaching paradigm, it's used quite often, which is fake it till you make it. In the traditional business model, in the traditional approaching success model, there were a lot of times when people were instructed to just fake it till you make it, break through the barriers that want to limit them from participation and so on, and success. And I believe that we are in a new era. When we're involved with this conversation, there is extraordinarily little room for that fake it till you make it modality. So I'm sorry, I'm further down this rabbit hole in detail than I meant to be, but it felt like an important conversation thread that Matthew and Elzan and I have been carrying for a while. We'll carry it more clearly into future calls, and possibly quite soon actually put together a task group thread about that, about doing our own inner work in preparation of offering it in good faith to the community. Oh, another pause point. Thank you. So I'd like to break us up into groups. There should be approximately 3 people in your group. I will be randomly assigning you. If you haven't done this before, you'll just watch the screen and follow the prompts to get to your group. If you have a question when you're in your group, you can come out, you can flag me and I can come and respond to you. With permission, I'd like to be in one of the groups, and if I'm in your group, the recording comes with me. So if you're uncomfortable with that, please let me know, and I'm happy to move out and go to a different group. I think that's it. What we're going to do is have, again, 3 people in a group. Please assign, as soon as you come together, a timekeeper, and there'll be 10 minutes total for this first round of conversation, approximately 3 minutes per person. And I will give you a notice a minute before we're all to be coming back with one another. And the question that I'd like you all to bring to each other is, how can I introduce myself in this community? How would I like to be known and seen in this community? So please start with the basics, like your name and where you are living, and what you do in the world, either for your living, if you'd like to share that, or particularly with regard to deep adaptation work. If you are a practitioner, or if you're just a sincere and engaged lay person, that's fine. So introducing yourself, and the last piece I would like you to introduce yourself with is, what is the natural level of engagement for your attention in the world? So let me give you an example. If I'm ill at the moment and I'm really need to have a lot of attention on my body and my well-being, then I have the smallest level of how I engage my attention and intention in the world. If out from there, if life is going okay with my own health and so on, where I normally deploy my attention, especially if I happen to be a practitioner in deep adaptation work, where does that work? Sometimes there are some practitioners that work with couples and families. So that's one level of engagement. There are some people that are engaged in the largest conversation in the history of humanity, that engage on the local level. They work on local projects, they have a local focus for their attention. This is where they engage with their deep adaptation attention. There are still other people that work very, very well on the state or region or provincial or national level and political level or activism level. So if that's the level that you participate in most naturally, share that. And then if it's something different than what I've said, please share that. So introducing ourselves to each other. And I will be breaking us up into groups of approximately 3. And we will be doing this for the next 10 minutes.
Where I feel myself.
Hello,
Here.
Dee. We've
Hey.
got we weren't sure if we were getting a third.
Hi there. Is this okay that I'm joining you?
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Please continue. I'm sorry to interrupt.
We just
So
started.
Joseph was starting.
And San, you take the time, 3 minutes.
Yes.
I just started. I'm Josef from Freiburg. And where I am at is really how to meet my neighbors, my friends, my family, and also my clients in my practice. I'm a psychotherapist, and also my participants in my spiritual groups. How to approach them with where I'm engaged in, how to offer this work also. And I have a plan for the autumn for a big group of 50 people where I offer this work, and I'm quite excited. I'm also curious. Where I'm at is how to deal with the defenses which come up. All the defenses like, oh yeah, it's not so, it's not for me. But yes, it's true, but still I want to fly and so on, yeah. Where I feel like I spoil the beautiful life people have. So how to address that, how to come in contact. Yeah. A few days ago, I became granddad. Small Paul, just come from him, visited him just half an hour ago before I met you here, and it's beautiful. So my level of engagement is partly with him and the young couple, daughter of my wife and his husband. But I work a lot less in my practice, so I have time for engagement in this work. And I feel like called doing. I'm in the group, in the XR, Extinction Rebellion here in Freiburg too. I have support for myself, a lot of friends in my spiritual group, Rit One group, where I do a lot of inquiry where I am at. Yeah, that's it for the moment. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to go, Dean?
I could. I'm going to go very briefly, giving you hopefully quite enough time, Elzan. I'm Dean Walker. I live in Southern Oregon in the USA. I do work around deep adaptation and the collapse of Earth and human systems all the time. That's what I do. So the level that I work at shifts from the very, very intimate and personal out to the global and back. And I think as a short introduction, that's me. And so I know that there could be more, but I really want to give you time, Elzan, and thank you both for including me.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Dean.
So I'm Elzan, and I'm currently in Pretoria in South Africa. I have been involved for a long time with a small community of therapists and scholars who engage in studies around archetypal psychology, specifically the work of James Hillman, kind of post-Jungian training, and bringing that home to a lot of somatic initiatory work. I've been immersed in that for about 15 years. South Africa is not particularly open-minded, and this is not mainstream here by any means. So it's a very small community and it's off the map. And I've been insulated because of that. I've practiced, I've worked with clients under the radar for a long time, under the radar of the sort of mainstream psychological community. And it's time to come out of that. And it's difficult for me because I really want to find where this connects. It does, it absolutely connects with what we're doing here, but I'm treading water at the moment. I kind of don't quite know how to bridge. I find that my community is not particularly interested in stepping out of its isolation, and I'm standing on an edge, breaking ground and figuring that out, how to do that without this sort of sense of armoring that having had a long-standing place in the world would offer me. So that's what I'm struggling with at the moment, and at the same time just struggling to open my heart to this, you know, how to step forward and just really challenge myself to go deeper. I prefer, in terms of the areas to connect, I like small groups and one-on-one. I've never been not much for the limelight. And I also wonder just how much of that is a little bit of a trick I play with myself. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Elzan.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, Joseph, how long have you been on the forum? Did you join recently?
Yeah, recently, yes. Just 3 weeks or so, yeah. Few weeks.
Wow, okay. And did you come on, how did you find it? How did you connect?
Yeah, through friends in the Extinction Rebellion group here. And
Okay.
through one friend, she's in my spiritual group and she's deeply working there. And she shared a video of Jem with me, and we inquired together, we worked on it. So this was a half year ago, and since then I'm myself involved, but now also in the community.
Okay.
What I find funny is DA is the same like my
Hello?
Uh,
60 seconds was really short.
wow, that was, I apologize. I have no idea what Zoom was thinking.
Yeah.
I'm used to it being a very soft 1 minute landing, and I apologize. That was just deeply rude. I so apologize.
Well, shit happens.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
Dean, are we all out of our groups? Because I got bumped out of breakout number 6 in the middle of a conversation.
Yes, that happened to all of us, and again, I just apologize for that rudeness. What I'm used to is you get a 1 minute warning, and you get to wrap up what you're wrapping up, and that did not happen this time. So, yeah, ouch.
I'm still.
That was a non-linear change.
That's right. I just was about to say the center of effort, and I'm holding it as incomplete, and the last 2 words are planetary hospice. Now I'm complete.
Good. Good. Well, thank you all for your patience with that. I'd like to take us to one more breakout, and hopefully just allow us to go just a level deeper with each other. And a welcome to anyone who's shown up since the beginning of the last one. That we've got a couple of new people, and actually a couple of people who have left as well. So in this next breakout, you may or may not be with the same people, and it will still be approximately 3 minutes per person and approximately 3 persons in each group. And it's a 2-part question. I'm assuming that many of us have heard the words that Jim Bendel uses in his own writing about deep adaptation, that we are in a world of both current and imminent collapse of social systems. And I would just add to that, human-caused collapse of Earth and human systems. And so the first part of the question for this next breakout is, how is this world of current and imminent collapse of systems affecting you? And the second part of your sharing in this next breakout group would be, how is the work that can be called deep adaptation, whatever that means to you, how is that kind of inner work showing up for you? Is that useful? Are you finding value? Are you challenged? So how are you affected by the collapse of systems that are current or imminent in our world? And how is this inner work, and for that matter, the outer work that can be called deep adaptation, how is it affecting you? Any questions about that? I think we're good. All right. Once again, please set up a timekeeper, and it'll be 10 minutes that will be in this group as well.
Oh, hi, Dean.
Hi. It's okay that I'm here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, so we've got 2 questions, right, Dean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Matthew, do you want to start?
I can do, yeah. I'll keep time as well. I've got a timepiece here.
Terrific.
So 3 minutes. Interesting. How is deep adaptation affecting me? No, how is collapse awareness affecting me? About 3 years ago, I had a period of deep depression. Or not depression, what's the word? Immobility, paralysis, despair, as I really, really took on board the scale of our predicament, and grief for the end of everything. So it took me a while to climb out of that, and meanwhile I'd been life coaching, and getting really, really fed up with trying to adjust people better into a system that I saw as broken, and so I kind of let go of my couching practice at the same time. My response was to get out of the UK. I didn't want to be in the UK. I was very certain about that. And I was visiting friends in Bulgaria, and I like the fact that the worst has already happened here not so long ago, after the fall of communism. It's already been a collapse here, and people got through and they know how to survive, and they're much closer to the ground, which makes me feel closer to the ground. So I have wobbles, but I'm kind of, I was saying to Dean earlier, I know where I'm heading now. I know the state of mind and being, and I'm within reach of it now, to be positively adapted, and to be present to the scale of collapse and what's coming, and to feel it, but to also be with the joy of life and the universe. And I feel those segments are starting to come together in my being, and that in doing that I can be with other people that are and be of service to people that are also going through that process. Yeah. So deep adaptation, I'm looking at, I'm also looking at low-tech solutions for not sustainable living, fragile living, that can help people. And that's my 3 minutes. Doink. So would you like to go, Elizabeth or Dean?
Sure. Yeah. Should I go ahead, Dean?
Yeah, you go, Elizabeth.
Okay. Okay, good. Well, I appreciate what you had to say, Matthew. Thank you for what you shared. So I would say I started feeling climate anxiety back in 2004 and 5. And by 2006, I was fully in the collapse conversation. And I was experiencing, it was just really knocking me flat. And I was on edge and triggered. I even went to see 3 different therapists to try to talk about this, and they all looked at me with a blank stare and wanted to get into my relationship with my mother. But it did, right? Really pathologized. And but it did kick me onto an initial path of saying, okay, I've got complex PTSD from trauma from earlier in my life. I do need to attend to this. I'm experiencing collapse in a very severe way, in part because it's triggering past trauma. So I've been on this path of healing my past trauma. I'm now kind of coming out of my wound, finally out of my nightmare from the past. And here I am, and everybody is hurting. Everybody's in their wound. Everybody's traumatized, whether they can identify it as such or not. And so I feel like I've faced the worst kind of collapse scenarios about 13 years ago. But right now I have a very firm rudder in the water from this deep adaptation work. And it's very much about a film I'm making called River of Color about post-traumatic growth in women trauma survivors. and it's giving me a real sense of purpose. And every time I work on it, it deepens my healing. And when I step back to work on my healing, it deepens the film. And so I'm in this beautiful feedback loop. And so, and my own personal practices kind of gone, it's been like peeling away the onion, and now it's very much about stillness, my practice of stillness and self-compassion. So I guess that sort of sums it up, how I've been affected by collapse. Sometimes these days I do go to kind of a dark place, because I could absolutely imagine my husband and I were in a financially delicate position. Things could go away at any time, and we could end up with the homeless that everybody is showing a lot of hostility to. That could be us. So.
Thank you. Wow.
Wow. I got to say, I am particularly touched by being able to be with the two of you in this sharing. And to hear you share those things, Elizabeth, those are slightly different and perhaps deeper than I've heard you share before. So thank you.
Thank you.
However I can possibly mean it, because I have no idea what it really is to support one another in these times. But I just hear you, and I hold you in my heart, and I just wish you the best. And I so honor the integrity with which you carry your process. It's very, very inspiring to me.
Thank you.
Yeah. So how I've been affected by all this, really, I have not been the same human being, not even a little, for about the past 5 years. Maybe it's actually closer to 7, but for sure 5. And I'm the most alive and focused and clear and grounded and powerful that I've ever been. And I'm also a hot mess when I am. And I'm also deeply confronted at the unraveling of everything I was raised to believe was completely and utterly count-onable forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I've just answered both in kind of one response. Yeah. It is a deep privilege to be alive now. I don't take it for granted. At least I try to keep myself present to the miracle that it is to be alive right now as best I can. And sometimes that has all the look and feel of a, so are you both getting something on the screen telling you have a minute?
Yes.
Great, yay. I don't get those messages, so. Maybe what I've said already says it. It's
Well,
that.
Dean, one thing I just really appreciated you doing, and I see you doing this quite often, and it's really modeled something important for me, is when you paused to really kind of name what we're contemplating here.
Mm-hmm.
It is terrifying. It's never been contemplated ever in the history of civilization or mankind. So I just appreciate that you go to a place of real humility and authenticity and vulnerability. Because it is easy. That's yeah, it's like one of my protective parts goes toward analysis, conceptualizing things so I don't really feel that. And I noticed that movement away from the tender place in me, which is where it's really happening. So I appreciate that you often do that with yourself, and that's helpful for me.
For me, Dean, you're like an elevator going right down to the depth.
Good to see you. Well said.
Thank you both. I'm going to hit the magic go button.
Okay.
Okay.
Space to help.
Nice talking to you, Matthew.
And you. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Oh well, did it again.
Did you get a 1 minute warning this time?
It said 1 minute warning, but it actually flipped in less than 10 seconds.
But a minute ago, you didn't get one. Okay,
No,
I did send one out a minute ago. Okay, some people got that.
Yeah. I got that.
We had a minute, didn't we?
Yeah.
I was yanked out of the first group.
You know, we're going to have to start a trauma recovery group for
Zoom,
recovering from these calls.
Users of Zoom. When you're mid-flow, mid-share, and something really juicy's coming, you get yanked out of a room.
All right. Yes, Amy, so agree with you. It is the sort of the built-in limitation of these calls. We now have approximately 6 minutes left in this call, and I would like to name what Amy's so beautifully naming right now, which is we're just getting started. We needed more time. We were barely connected, and so on. I absolutely get it, and yes. I want to, in advance, thank you all for showing up for the forum, showing up in life to be engaged in this conversation, which the privileged among us on this planet can still choose to be engaged with or not. I so thank you for your participation, whatever that is, in this conversation, and for being here in this forum. There are so much we have not even remotely touched on today. This thing about blending two large groups, and there are, again, more than 500 people who are coming together from two groups into one in this, which will now be the largest group in the Deep Adaptation Forum. And there are so many possibilities to come together in these small groups, these small focus groups, these, I forget what they're called, the task groups. And perhaps you'll find some connection with other people in the Positive Deep Adaptation Facebook group. And there are many other, okay. So I would like to open up the microphones for just a few minutes for any sort of sharing. And I would just ask that you keep it a bit brief so a number of people can get an opportunity to presence themselves on the call today. And thank you for your patience with again, these inherent limitations of the call. And is there someone who would like to begin?
I'll begin.
Please.
Thank you very much, everyone. It was lovely to meet you all. It's great. I feel like every time we do this meeting, something deepens. So it's been really, it's been lovely, the few conversations that I've had, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
This is the first one that I've attended, and it's quite a novel experience for me. And I've enjoyed it, and I'm glad to participate. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dean, for facilitating.
Hey, thank you for meeting you all. I enjoyed the conversation. I am an optimistic guy, so I want you all to be upbeat so that we can take care of each other at the end of the day. So let's be open for great ideas, suggestions, and work together as a team. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you.
This is David Chilcott. Just appreciating the sense of connection and belonging that I experience, and having the opportunity to have this conversation. It's a great contradiction to my sense of isolation And I appreciate your presence. And thank you, Dean. Great job.
Thank you, David. And I'd like to mention, David, you put out a invitation if I needed some help co-hosting, and that's a very distinct possibility. It would be helpful. I'd also like to mention that Amy mentioned in the chat something about what if we could get together in some smaller groups, perhaps regionally. That you may or may not be feeling that desire to have a smaller group, more depth in sharing, and perhaps with a different focus. I want to open up this invitation as broadly as I possibly can. This is not just something that the volunteer moderators like myself can put together. You can do this too. And you can do that with the whole group. You can call it, and what we would just ask is, kind of clear it through us, or let us help you put it together, and so we can have a standard of production quality and so on. But you are absolutely invited to call a meeting, and that could be for all the group, or it could be for a smaller subgroup, for a task group. So Amy, I'd recommend put on your invitation gloves and start tapping away at creating a task group or a focus group if you'd like, a regional group. There are so many possibilities, and it has barely been utilized here. And again, David, thank you for your offer. Perhaps we can connect via email or something to just look at that possibility, but thank you. And is there anyone else who'd like to just share, to present yourself briefly in this call in these last few moments?
Hi, I'm Anneli from Sweden. I just want to say thank you and hello to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's my first call, so I really enjoyed it.
Thank
See you
you
later.
Thank you. Good to have you here. And I'd also like to mention, it really is 10:30 my time on the West Coast. Officially, the call is ended. If you must go, then please feel free. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm happy to keep this channel open for another 5 minutes or so-ish, so we could just have a little bit more connection time, a little bit more time to wrap it up in a good way. So for those who need to go, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. And for anyone else who would like to chime in right now as a way of completing, please feel free.
Hello, David. I'm Martha Lou. I think my mic is unmuted.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. I just wrote in the chat, how do we find each other? Is there like an email list of all of us, or because I see David's down there in Oakland and I'm here in Berkeley, and it's not too far.
Yeah. The quick answer is, Martha Lou, that I think the best we can do in this environment, is to connect via the chat during a call, as a number of people already have been doing, which you can do personally. If you'd like to personally connect with a particular person, you can click on them and you can share messages back and forth that way. If you want to put out a broader invitation, you're welcome to do that in the chat, and people can respond to you individually. And you all have the ability to message each other in the Deep Adaptation Forum. It's one of the components of the forum. So if there's somebody that caught your ear about a particular project, you can at the very least go find them there, send them a message, and off you go.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Tori. Yeah, it is a catastrophe. It is unfolding. And this is the best opportunity we're ever going to get to kick ourselves in the ass at the species level and evolve. So let's get it done.
All right. Thank you, Tori. Thank you.
Oh, can anyone hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. This is, I was speaking. I thought people could hear me, but this is Robert I'm in Pennsylvania, the East Coast, but appreciating everything everyone's saying, and the West Coast people love to meet them. But also, too, I'm noticing that some of the workshops Jim Bendel's doing are in England, and just hoping, we could do something like that in the United States, or maybe someone could think about that, where people could come to. So that's it. And thank you for facilitating, and everyone.
Thank you. Great idea. And I believe that there are a couple of ideas circulating, one about creating a conference in the Bay Area about deep adaptation, and another, I've seen a couple of postings, and I myself am available to look at putting together some workshops. Having gone to Jem and Katie's first workshop in Greece just a couple of months ago, I'm happy to relay whatever I can to someone who might be able to want to focus up that effort and put together a workshop in your area. So I'm Dean Walker on the forum, and so if you're interested, send me a message.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Are we done?
Yes.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for enduring the limitations of the call and making it a gorgeous experience. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you,
All right,
Dean.
guys. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.